The first time my husband erased me, he did it in front of a room full of people and smiled while doing it. It happened on a Thursday night in early May at a charity fashion gala in downtown Savannah. The kind with white linens, crystal glasses, and donors who clap politely because that's what you do when money is in the room. I was 31 years old, standing 3 steps behind my husband, watching him accept credit for my work like it had always belonged to him. Before I take you back to how we got there, pause for a moment. If you've ever been overlooked by the person who promised to stand beside you, if you've ever been told to be patient while someone else took what you built, like this, comment or subscribe. Not because I need it, but because stories like this only get told when people listen. Now let me tell you what happened. My name is Amelia Rhodes. I own a small custom tailoring and design shop called Harbor Thread, 2 blocks from the Riverwalk. Or at least, I thought I owned it. For 7 years, I designed, drafted, cut, and stitched garments for weddings, corporate events, and private clients who wanted clothes that fit their bodies instead of fighting them. I worked 60-hour weeks. I paid rent on time. I kept records. I built a reputation, stitch by stitch. My husband, Nathaniel Rhodes, liked to call himself the business side. That night at the gala, Nathaniel adjusted his cufflinks and stepped up to the microphone when the host announced Harbor Thread as the designer behind the evening's featured collection. The collection I had sewn alone after midnight for 3 straight weeks. He cleared his throat. When I started Harbor Thread, he said, I wanted to build something meaningful for this community. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I felt the words land and settle somewhere cold. He went on, thanked donors, thanked the city, thanked himself, without ever saying my name. People clapped. Someone leaned over and whispered to me, "You must be so proud of him." I smiled. The way you do when you realize the ground has already shifted under your feet. That was the moment that looked dramatic. It wasn't the beginning. It was just the first time the truth stopped hiding. If you'd asked me a year earlier, I would have told you Nathaniel believed in me, that he supported my dream, that marrying him was a partnership. That's what I said out loud. What I didn't say was that my name wasn't on the lease, that the business account required his signature, that every time a contract came in, he insisted on handling it because paperwork stressed me out. He said it gently, always gently. Amelia, just focus on sewing. You're better when you're not distracted. I grew up learning how to disappear when things got tense. My mother, Claire Morgan, taught me that peace mattered more than credit. My younger sister, Rebecca Morgan, learned early how to ask for more. I learned how to wait. Nathaniel noticed that. People like him always do. The gala was for the Coastal Women's Fund, a local nonprofit that supported job training programs. They'd asked Harbor Thread to design a small capsule collection to auction off. 10 pieces. Clean lines, inclusive sizing, ethical materials. I said yes without hesitation. It was good exposure. I worked nights after regular orders. I tracked every cost. Fabric alone was almost $6,000. I paid it myself, from my savings. Nathaniel told me not to worry. He said the auction would cover everything and more. The week before the event, I asked to see the contract with the fund. He told me it was handled. The day before the event, I asked who the check would be made out to. He kissed my forehead and said, "Don't stress. That should have been my cue." Instead, I steamed dresses and packed garment bags. At the gala, after the applause died down, the fund's director, a woman named Lillian Park, approached Nathaniel with a handshake. Then she turned to me. "You must be Amelia," she said. "We've heard wonderful things." Nathaniel's hand tightened around his glass. "She's my wife," he said quickly. "She helps." "Helps." Lillian smiled politely, then glanced at the paperwork on her clipboard. "We'll finalize the partnership agreement next week," she said. "The check will be issued to Rhodes Atelier per the document." I felt my stomach drop. Rhodes Atelier was a name I'd never registered. That night, after the gala, we argued in the car. Quietly. Controlled. The way arguments go when one person knows they hold the keys. "It's just a structure thing," Nathaniel said. "Investors prefer a clean brand." "What investors?" He didn't answer. When we got home, I went straight to the computer and pulled up the state business registry. My hands were steady. My chest wasn't. Rhodes Atelier LLC, registered 3 months earlier. Owner and managing member, Nathaniel Rhodes. Harbor Thread wasn't listed anywhere. I sat there until the screen went dark. The next morning, I opened my shop like nothing had changed. I hemmed trousers for a retiree named Margaret Lewis. I fitted a bridesmaid named Zoe Carter, who cried because she finally felt comfortable in her body. I smiled. I pinned. I stitched. And I watched Nathaniel take calls in the back, door closed, voice low. That afternoon, my landlord, Thomas Bell, stopped by. "Nate told me you're expanding," he said casually. "Congrats." My needle slipped. Just slightly. "Expanding how?" I asked. "Second location," he said. "Downtown." He asked about early termination options. I nodded, thanked him, locked the door after he left. That was the moment the story changed shape. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. I felt something colder. A realization that every small concession I'd made had been recorded somewhere I couldn't see, added up into a version of my life I didn't recognize. That night, I didn't confront Nathaniel. I opened a new notebook, labeled it with a date. I wrote down everything I could remember. Dates, payments, conversations, who said what, when. I didn't know yet what I would do with it. I only knew this. If someone is willing to erase you quietly, they are counting on you to stay quiet. And I was done being counted on that way. At the end of that week, Nathaniel came home late, excited. He poured wine and said, "Big things are coming." I smiled and nodded, because what he didn't know was that the smallest stitch, pulled at the right moment, can unravel an entire seam. The first move wasn't dramatic. It never is, when you've spent years being trained to stay agreeable. The morning after Nathaniel told me big things are coming, I woke up before dawn and walked to Harbor Thread alone. The street smelled like river fog and bakery exhaust. The shop lights hummed when I flipped them on, the same way they always had. Nothing looked different. That was the problem. I unlocked the filing cabinet beneath my cutting table and pulled out every folder I'd labeled by hand over the years. Client contracts, fabric invoices, deposit slips, alteration logs. I laid them out on the floor in chronological order, 7 years of work forming a quiet timeline around my feet. My name was on everything, except the things that mattered legally. At 9 a.m., my first appointment walked in. A corporate client named Denise Holloway. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, head of HR for a logistics company just outside Savannah. I was tailoring blazers for her executive team. She glanced around the shop. "I heard you're expanding," she said. I didn't ask how she heard. "That's news to me," I replied, calm. She studied my face for a second. "Your husband mentioned it at the fundraiser." Of course he did. I pinned her sleeve and said nothing. But something clicked into place. Nathaniel wasn't just building something without me. He was already speaking as if I'd been replaced. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I closed early. I walked 3 blocks to the county clerk's office and pulled every public record I could legally request. Business filings, assumed names, property leases. It took 2 hours and $27. By the time I walked out, I knew 3 things. First, Rhodes Atelier LLC was real, active, and funded. Second, the initial capital contribution came from a joint account Nathaniel and I shared, the same account where my client deposits went. Third, Harbor Thread was never registered as an entity. It existed only as a name on a door and an idea people associated with my face. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a slow-motion transfer. That night, I cooked dinner like usual. Nathaniel talked about meetings, donors, the optics. I nodded at the right places. I asked questions that made him comfortable. I didn't argue. People mistake silence for ignorance. It's usually observation. When he went to shower, I opened his laptop. Not to snoop randomly, to confirm what I already suspected. There it was. A draft partnership agreement with the Coastal Women's Fund. Rhodes Atelier listed as sole designer and vendor. Payment terms, press credits, future exclusivity, my designs, my measurements, my work. Signed digitally by Nathaniel Rhodes. I closed the laptop and washed my hands. Twice. The next morning, I called my mother, Claire Morgan. She answered on the third ring. "You sound tired," she said. "I need to ask you something," I replied. "Of course." When I married Nathaniel, I asked, "Did you think I was giving something up?" She hesitated, just long enough. "I thought you were choosing stability," she said carefully. I thanked her and hung up. At Harbor Thread, I took in 2 new orders and turned down 1 rush job. Not because I couldn't do it, because I needed time. I needed to think beyond fabric and thread. That afternoon, Lillian Park from the Coastal Women's Fund walked into my shop unannounced. "I hope this is okay," she said. "I wanted to meet you properly." I smiled. "I'm glad you came." She looked around, taking in the racks, the cutting table, the mannequins shaped by years of pinning. "This doesn't look like a satellite operation," she said. "It isn't," I replied. We sat. I poured coffee. I didn't accuse. I didn't complain. I asked questions. "How did you hear about Rhodes Atelier?" I asked. "Your husband," she said. "He pitched it as a growing design house, led by a strong male founder with a talented spouse." "Talented spouse," I nodded slowly. "Did he mention Harbor Thread?" "No," she said. "Is that separate?" "Yes," I said. "It's mine." She went still. "I design here," I continued. "I pay rent here. I hired and trained every assistant we've ever had. I designed the collection you saw at the gala here." Lillian didn't interrupt. "I'm not asking you to take sides," I said. "I'm asking you to delay signing anything until you understand who you're working with." She leaned back, exhaled. "I appreciate you telling me this." When she left, I locked the door and sat on the floor for a long time. That was the first crack, not in my marriage, in the version of myself that thought loyalty would protect me. 2 days later, Nathaniel came home excited again. "They want exclusivity," he said. "This could go national." I looked up from hemming a dress. "That's great," I said. "Which designer will they credit?" He blinked. "What?" "The designs," I said. "Who gets named?" He smiled, indulgent. "We're a team, Amelia." No, we weren't. That night, I moved my personal savings into a new account under my name only. I did it legally, quietly. The money was mine, earned, documented. I also booked a consultation with a small business attorney named Julia Mendel, recommended by Denise Holloway. The appointment was for the following Tuesday. Nathaniel didn't notice the shift. He was too busy planning a launch party for Rhodes Atelier, scheduled for mid-June. Invitations were already drafted, location booked, press invited. My name wasn't on any of it. The launch wasn't just a business event. It was a declaration. And the more he prepared for it, the clearer it became. He wasn't just taking credit. He was taking my place. By the end of that week, I knew one thing for certain. If I didn't act, Harbor Thread would disappear. And so would I. So I stopped asking myself how to save the marriage and started asking a different question. What would it take to reclaim my work without asking for permission? The answer was already forming. Nathaniel escalated before I did. That was the mistake. The Tuesday before my meeting with Julia Mendel, I arrived at Harbor Thread to find the locks changed. Not broken, not forced, replaced. A clean brass deadbolt where my old key no longer turned. My name still painted on the window. My mannequins visible inside, frozen mid-pose like they were waiting for me to come back. I stood there for a full minute, hand on the door, breathing slow. This wasn't panic. Panic is loud. This was confirmation. My phone buzzed. "Nathaniel, we need to talk before you come in. Please, don't make a scene." I stepped back, took a photo of the lock, the door, the sign with my business name still above it, and walked to the coffee shop across the street. I ordered black coffee and sat by the window, where I could see everything. He arrived 20 minutes later, already irritated. "You weren't answering," he said, sitting across from me. "I was outside my shop," I replied. "Our shop," he corrected. I met his eyes. "You changed the locks." "Yes," he said, not denying it. "For security. You've been emotional lately." There it was. The word men use when women stop cooperating. "You locked me out of my workplace," I said evenly. He leaned forward. "Amelia, you don't understand how serious this is. Investors are coming. We need consistency. One brand, one voice." "And that voice isn't mine," I said. He sighed like I was exhausting him. "You're better behind the scenes. That's always been true." I took another sip of coffee. "You stole my business." He laughed. actually laughed. "No," he said. "I professionalized it." That was when I realized this wasn't about control anymore. It was about erasure. "I want my things," I said. "My patterns, my equipment, my client files." "You'll get what you need to sew," he replied. "I'll have them delivered." I stood up. "I'll see you in court," I said. His smile disappeared. "You won't," he said. "You don't have standing." I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I walked out. At Julia Mendel's office that afternoon, I laid everything out. The locks, the LLC, the joint account, the contracts, the gala. Julia listened without interrupting, fingers steepled, eyes sharp. "You built a business without a legal shell," she said finally. "That's the vulnerability he exploited." "I know," I replied. "But," she continued, "that doesn't mean you're powerless." She slid a legal pad toward me. "Tell me exactly what you own," she said. I did, down to the last industrial iron. "And the designs?" she asked. "I drafted every pattern," I said. "I have dated originals, sketchbooks, digital files backed up on my personal drive." Julia nodded. "Good. And the name Harbor Thread?" I asked. She looked at me. "Unregistered, but publicly associated with you. That matters." "For what?" I asked. "For leverage," she said. "We spent 3 hours mapping options. Not fantasies, real moves. Conversion, injunction, intellectual property claims, unjust enrichment." "Here's the thing," Julia said at the end. "You don't want to burn it down. You want to separate cleanly." I thought of the locked door, of Nathaniel's smile. "I want my work back," I said. "And I want him to stop using my name." Julia nodded. "Then we start by documenting everything he touches." That evening, I went home to pack. Not to leave, to reclaim space. Nathaniel was on the phone when I walked in, laughing. He covered the receiver when he saw me. "Not now," he mouthed. I went to the bedroom and opened my laptop, pulled my backups, synced my files to a cloud account under my name, exported every design with timestamps. Then I packed a suitcase. When Nathaniel came in, his tone shifted. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I'm staying with my sister," I said. Rebecca Morgan lived 40 minutes away, in a small apartment near Tybee Island. She opened the door in pajamas and took one look at my face. "He did something," she said. "Yes," I replied. She didn't ask questions. She handed me a glass of wine and cleared space on the couch. The next morning, I got an email from a client. It was Zoe Carter, the bridesmaid I'd fitted the week before. "Hi, Amelia. Nate said Harbor Thread is rebranding and my fitting is canceled. Is that true?" I stared at the screen. Then another email came in, then another. I replied to each one, carefully. "Harbor Thread is temporarily closed due to a dispute. I will be in touch directly regarding your garments." By noon, Nathaniel was calling nonstop. "You're sabotaging me," he said, when I finally answered. "You canceled my clients," I replied. "They're my clients now," he snapped. "No," I said. "They're people who trusted me." That night, Lillian Park emailed again. "We need to pause everything. There are concerns about representation and credit." Nathaniel didn't know that yet, but he would. Because the lockout wasn't just a power move, it was evidence. And as I lay awake on Rebecca's couch, listening to the hum of the air conditioner, I realized something that made me almost smile. He thought he'd cornered me. What he'd actually done was make the line visible. And once a line is visible, it can be crossed. In the next chapter, I stop trying to get back inside Harbor Thread. I build something new, and he doesn't see it coming. I didn't go back to Harbor Thread. That surprised everyone, including me. For 3 days after the lockout, I stayed at my sister Rebecca Morgan's apartment and answered emails like it was my job. Clients, vendors, a florist who wanted to know if the dresses were still coming, a venue coordinator asking who to invoice. I didn't vent. I didn't explain. I documented. On the 4th morning, Julia Mendel called. "He's moved inventory," she said. "Transferred it to a storage unit under Rhodes Atelier." I pictured my fabric bolts, my dress forms, the industrial steamer I'd bought used and rebuilt myself, all stacked somewhere anonymous. "Good," I said. There was a pause. "That's not what most people say." "I don't need the equipment yet," I replied. "I need the work to stop being his." Julia exhaled, thoughtful. "Then we do this the other way." We filed a demand letter that afternoon. Narrow, precise. It didn't accuse. It asserted. Ownership of designs. copyright claims on patterns. Injunction request, preventing Rhodes Atelier from selling or promoting any piece derived from my work. Nathaniel responded within 2 hours. Not through his lawyer, through text. You're embarrassing yourself. This won't end well, I didn't reply. Instead, I walked 2 blocks from Rebecca's place to a vacant storefront with a for lease sign that had faded in the sun. The windows were dusty, the floor uneven. It smelled like old paint and potential. I called the number. The landlord's name was Marisol Vega. She met me that afternoon, keys jingling, hair pulled back tight like she didn't waste time. "What are you thinking of doing here?" she asked, unlocking the door. "A tailoring studio," I said. "Custom, small, clean." She looked me over. "How soon?" "Immediately," I replied. She smiled. Good answer. By the end of the day, I'd signed a short-term lease under my name. No partners, no joint accounts, just me. That night, Nathaniel posted photos on social media. Models wearing my designs, captioned with, "Rhodes Atelier debuting a new direction." The comments were enthusiastic. The likes piled up. I saved everything. The next morning, I announced something quieter. A single post from my personal account. I'm opening a new studio. Same hands, same standards. New address soon. No drama, no explanation. Within an hour, Denise Holloway emailed, "I'll follow you wherever you go. Tell me when you're ready." Then, Zoe Carter, "Please don't leave me without my dress." Then, 3 more. By the end of the day, my inbox felt different. Not loud, intentional. Nathaniel called that evening. "This is petty," he said. "You're splitting the brand." "There was never one brand," I replied. "There was my work and your paperwork." He scoffed. "You think people care who sews? They care about the name." "We'll see," I said. The following week was a blur of paint samples, Craigslist furniture, and borrowed equipment. Rebecca helped me clean. Her friend Mateo Alvarez, a photographer she dated briefly and stayed friends with, offered to shoot simple portraits for free. "No headshots," I told him. "Hands, fabric, process." He nodded. "Got it." Meanwhile, Nathaniel's lawyer finally responded. A denial. A claim that all designs were works made for hire under Rhodes Atelier. Julia smiled when she read it. "That's bold," she said, "and wrong." We filed for a temporary injunction, attached my dated drafts, my invoices, my backups, photos of me fitting clients years before Rhodes Atelier existed. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. Nathaniel didn't expect that. He showed up at Rebecca's apartment unannounced the night before my soft opening. "You're destroying everything," he said. I stood in the doorway. Didn't invite him in. "You destroyed our marriage," he continued. "I'm trying to salvage a future." "Without me," I said. "With you," he insisted. "Just not like before." I looked at him then. Really looked. "Before," I said, "was me shrinking." He shook his head. "You're being unreasonable." "No," I replied. "I'm being finished." He left, angry, loud, slamming doors. Rebecca watched from the kitchen, arms crossed. "I never liked him," she said. The soft opening of my new studio happened on a Saturday morning. No ribbon, no press. Just clients by appointment and a handwritten sign on the door. Amelia Rhodes, Tailoring. My name. Full. Undiluted. The first fitting was Zoe Carter. She cried again. This time because the dress was perfect, and she'd been afraid she'd lose it. "You didn't," I said. At noon, Lillian Park walked in. "I wanted to see for myself," she said. She watched me work, asked questions, took notes. "I'm withdrawing the fund from Rhodes Atelier," she said quietly before she left. "We'll reissue under your name once the court clarifies." I thanked her. Didn't celebrate. That afternoon, Nathaniel's social media posts slowed. Comments turned cautious. Someone asked why Amelia wasn't tagged anymore. He deleted the post. By Sunday night, he sent one last message. "You're forcing my hand." I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned my phone face down and went back to sewing. Because this wasn't about winning online. It was about something slower, more permanent. And in the next chapter, the hearing doesn't go the way Nathaniel planned. Not because I shouted, but because the truth, when laid out cleanly, doesn't need volume. It just needs time. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and old paper. I arrived early. Not because I was nervous, but because I needed to feel the space before anyone else filled it with noise. The hearing wasn't dramatic. No jury, no crowd. Just a judge, two attorneys, and a stack of documents thick enough to weigh down the table. Nathaniel arrived 10 minutes late. He always did that when he wanted to look busy. Important. He wore a tailored navy suit I'd altered myself 2 years earlier. I noticed the sleeves immediately. Still perfect. My work had a way of lasting. He didn't look at me. His attorney, Charles Whitman, shook hands like this was routine. For him, it probably was. He'd filed motions like this for men like Nathaniel dozens of times. Men who thought paperwork could replace proof. Julia Mendel gave me a brief nod, calm, prepared. When the judge, Eleanor Ruiz, took her seat, the room settled. Charles spoke first. He framed the story cleanly. Rhodes Atelier as a growing business, me as a supportive spouse, designs created under the umbrella of the LLC, works made for hire. He spoke for 12 minutes. Julia spoke for 5. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She walked Judge Ruiz through dates, files, screenshots. She showed my original sketches, time-stamped years before Rhodes Atelier existed. Client invoices paid directly to me. Social media posts where clients tagged me, thanked me, named me. Then she handed over the lock photo. Judge Ruiz looked at it for a long time. "You changed the locks on a workspace displaying her business name," she said to Nathaniel. "Yes," he replied, "for security." "And did you provide her access to her property afterward?" "No," he said. "It was necessary." Judge Ruiz nodded once, like she'd already reached a conclusion. "The injunction is granted," she said, effective immediately. Rhodes Atelier is prohibited from selling, marketing, or claiming authorship of designs created by Ms. Rhodes. Nathaniel's head snapped up. "This is temporary," Charles said quickly. "It's sufficient," Judge Ruiz replied. "And I suggest you prepare for discovery." The gavel came down softly. It was over in 27 minutes. Outside, Nathaniel finally looked at me. "You did this on purpose," he said. I met his eyes. "I protected my work." "That's the same thing," he snapped. "No," I said. "It's the opposite of what you did." He walked away without another word. That afternoon, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Clients, vendors. One message from Denise Holloway that simply read, "Proud of you." I sat on the floor of my new studio, back against the wall, fabric scraps around me like proof of life. If this part of the story feels familiar, if you've ever had to defend your worth in a room where someone else spoke over you, take a second and let me know you're here. Like the video, subscribe, or leave a comment. Not for me, for yourself, because the quiet victories matter too. The injunction changed the tone overnight. Nathaniel pulled down every photo featuring my designs. Rhodes Atelier's website went dark for maintenance. 2 interns quit within days. One emailed me privately to ask if I was hiring. I didn't answer yet. I was busy. The next escalation didn't come from Nathaniel. It came from his mother. Evelyn Rhodes, 64, called me one evening from a number I hadn't saved. "I always knew you were talented," she said without greeting. "But you're being ungrateful." I leaned against the cutting table. "For what?" "For everything Nathaniel gave you," she said. I smiled to myself. "Name one thing." She hung up. That silence felt earned. 3 days later, Julia forwarded me an email from Charles Whitman. They wanted to settle. Nathaniel was offering a buyout, a lump sum, non-disclosure, non-disparagement. He wanted me quiet. I read it twice. "No," I told Julia. She raised an eyebrow. "Most people say yes." "I'm not most people," I replied. "And silence is what got me here." Julia nodded slowly. "Then we keep going." That week, Lillian Park called. "We're ready to reissue the contract," she said, "under your studio." I closed my eyes. "Thank you." "It won't be quiet," she added. "Press will ask questions." "That's fine," I said. "I won't answer all of them." The night before the announcement, Nathaniel texted, "Last chance to be reasonable." I didn't respond. The announcement went live the next morning. The Coastal Women's Fund credited Amelia Rhodes Tailoring as the sole designer. They posted behind-the-scenes photos from my new studio. My hands, my table, my name. Comments flooded in. Supportive, curious, some confused. Nathaniel didn't post anything. That afternoon, I received an email from a bridal shop in Charleston asking about a collaboration. Then one from a theater company. Then a message from a woman named Olivia Chen, owner of a small department store, asking if I'd consider a limited run. I sat back and let the quiet hum of the machines fill the space. This wasn't revenge. It was alignment. That night, Rebecca and I ate takeout on the studio floor. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and meant it. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. But I also knew something else. Nathaniel wasn't finished. Men like him don't accept loss when they think they're owed a narrative. And in the next chapter, he tries to take back control one last time. Not through business, through family. And that almost worked. Nathaniel didn't come at me through lawyers this time. He went through my family. It started with a phone call from my mother, Claire Morgan, on a Sunday afternoon when the light in the studio was soft and forgiving. I was basting a hem for a client who trusted me enough to leave her wedding dress overnight. "I heard some things," my mother said without preamble. I kept my hands moving. "From who?" "Nathaniel," she replied. "He's worried about you." I almost laughed. Almost. "Worried how?" I asked. "That you're letting pride ruin your marriage," she said. "That you're being led by anger." I set the needle down. Carefully. "Did he mention changing the locks?" She hesitated. "He said there were safety concerns." "Did he mention registering a company with our joint funds and excluding me?" Another pause. Longer. "He said you agreed to let him handle the business," she said. I closed my eyes. This was the pattern. Not malice. Translation. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice even. "I didn't agree. I complied. There's a difference." She sighed. "I just don't want you to burn bridges." "I'm not burning anything," I replied. "I'm stepping off it." She didn't respond to that. We ended the call politely, gently, like nothing had shifted. But something had. By Tuesday, Rebecca called. "You need to know what's going around," she said. "Nathaniel's been talking." "Where?" I asked. "Everywhere he can," she replied. "Church, friends, your aunt's book club." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. Not panic. Recognition. "What's he saying?" I asked. "That you're unstable," she said. "That the stress got to you. That you're trying to punish him." I leaned against the wall. "And they believe him." "Some do," she said. "Some don't." That night, I received an email from my aunt, Margaret Collins, my mother's older sister. The one who always praised my sewing, but never paid full price. The subject line read, "Concerned." It was 3 paragraphs long, full of love, full of disappointment. "You were always so level-headed, Amelia. I don't recognize this version of you." I stared at the words until they blurred. The version of me they recognized was the one who stayed quiet. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Julia Mendel. "He's building a narrative," she said after I explained. "He wants you emotional, reactive, isolated." "What do I do?" I asked. "You document," she replied, "and you don't engage." Easier said than done. On Thursday, my mother showed up at the studio unannounced. She stood in the doorway, looking around like she expected to find chaos. Instead, she found order. Fabric neatly stacked, clients' names pinned to a board, the hum of work. "This is nice," she said. "It's mine," I replied. She sat on the stool by the mirror, watched me work for a moment. "Nathaniel says you're refusing mediation," she said. "I'm refusing to be erased," I replied. She flinched. "Marriage requires compromise. So does theft," I said quietly. "Only one of those is illegal." She looked at me then, really looked. At my hands, the lines, the steadiness. "You always did things the hard way," she said. "I did them the right way," I replied. She left without another word. The next blow came from an unexpected place, the bank. I got a notification that the joint account I hadn't fully closed yet had been flagged. Large transfers, unusual activity. Nathaniel had emptied what was left. I wasn't surprised. I was prepared. Julia filed a motion within the hour. Improper withdrawal, evidence attached, timeline clear. By Friday, the account was frozen, pending review. Nathaniel called me for the first time in weeks. "You're ruining me," he said. No greeting, no warmth. "I'm stopping you," I replied. "You think you're better than me now?" he snapped. "No," I said. I think I'm done being smaller. Silence on the line. Then a low laugh. You don't win this, he said. People always side with the husband. I ended the call. That night, I sat alone in the studio, lights dimmed, listening to the city settle. I thought about the version of myself who would have apologized just to make the noise stop. She was gone. Saturday morning, something unexpected happened. Denise Holloway stopped by with coffee. I heard things, she said. I wanted to see you. She looked around. You don't look unstable. I smiled. I'm not. She leaned against the table. If you ever want to expand, I know people. Real people. Not optics. Thank you, I said. She hesitated. For what it's worth, when men lose control, they confuse it with betrayal. I've noticed, I replied. By Sunday evening, the narrative was shifting. Slowly. Not because I defended myself, because the truth doesn't need reinforcement when it's consistent. Nathaniel's version required constant maintenance. Mine just required me to keep working. That night, I received an email from Charles Whitman. They were withdrawing the settlement offer. The tone had changed. Sharper. Defensive. Julia replied with one sentence and an attachment. Discovery schedule attached. See you in court. I sat back and breathed. Nathaniel had tried to corner me, with family pressure, with money, with reputation. What he didn't understand was this. I had already lost what he was threatening to take. And once you stop fearing loss, leverage stops working. In the next chapter, the truth comes out publicly, not because I expose him, because he can't stop exposing himself. The truth didn't come out all at once. It leaked. That was the part Nathaniel never understood. He thought exposure happened in explosions, headlines, court rulings, public statements. He prepared for noise. What he wasn't prepared for was drift. It started with a quiet cancellation. On Monday morning, the launch party for Rhodes Atelier disappeared from the event venue's calendar. No announcement, no explanation, just gone. When someone asked about it in the comments on his last post, the comment vanished within minutes. By Tuesday, 2 of the donors who had been excited about his vision stopped returning his calls. By Wednesday, an article appeared in a local lifestyle blog. Small readership. Trusted voice. Savannah's creative shift. Independent makers step into the spotlight. My name appeared once. At the end. As an example of women-led studios reclaiming authorship, Rhodes Atelier wasn't mentioned at all. That kind of omission cuts deeper than criticism. Nathaniel showed up at the studio again that Thursday. This time, during business hours. I was fitting a client named Eleanor Brooks, late 50s, sharp posture, former prosecutor who didn't miss details. She noticed him immediately. I can come back, she said. No, I replied. We're almost done. Nathaniel stood by the door, jaw tight, eyes flicking between Eleanor and the racks of finished garments. You're busy, he said. Yes, I replied. Eleanor glanced at him. Is this the man who locked you out of your own shop? I paused, then smiled faintly. Yes, she nodded once. Figures. Nathaniel's face flushed. Can we talk? He asked. After my appointment, I said. Eleanor gathered her things, slowly, deliberately. As she passed him, she stopped. You should be ashamed, she said. Not loud, not dramatic, just factual. When the door closed, Nathaniel let out a breath. This is getting out of hand, he said. It's actually settling, I replied. You think people don't talk? He snapped. You think they don't know you're being vindictive? I met his eyes. Vindictive people destroy. I'm building. He scoffed. You think you're winning. I think I'm free, I said. He stared at me, searching for something. Fear, doubt, regret. He found none. I could still hurt you, he said. I nodded. You already did. That answer unsettled him more than anger would have. He left without another word. That afternoon, Julia called. He missed a filing deadline, she said. For what? I asked. A response to discovery, she replied. Not a small one. What happens now? I asked. Now the court notices patterns, she said. And patterns matter. The next escalation wasn't legal. It was social. A mutual friend named Hannah Lewis, who'd attended our wedding and hosted holidays, posted a long, vague message about betrayal and ambition tearing families apart. She didn't name names. She didn't have to. Comments poured in, some supportive, some cautious, some asking questions. I didn't engage. Instead, I posted a photo of my hands working on a silk bodice. No caption. The contrast spoke for itself. By Friday, the Coastal Women's Fund announced their upcoming showcase designers. My studio listed first. Lillian Park tagged me directly. "Congratulations to Amelia Rhodes Tailoring," she wrote. "Integrity matters." Nathaniel called me that night. "You turned them against me," he said. "I told the truth," I replied. "That's not the same thing," he snapped. "It is when the truth isn't flattering," I said. He went quiet. "Do you know what people are saying?" he asked. "I don't need to," I replied. There was a long pause. "You always did this," he said finally. "Made me look like the bad guy." I closed my eyes. "You did that yourself," I said. "I just stopped covering." He hung up. The following Monday, discovery documents arrived. Emails, drafts, messages Nathaniel had sent to donors referring to me as support staff, notes about managing my temperament, comments about controlling optics. Julia highlighted the relevant lines. "This will matter," she said. "To who?" I asked. "To anyone who still thinks this is a misunderstanding," she replied. That night, my mother called again. "I saw something online," she said. "What did you see?" I asked. She hesitated. "The emails." I didn't respond. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. Silence stretched between us. "I should have asked more questions," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Not unkindly." She sighed. "I'm sorry. It wasn't full accountability, but it was movement." That week, a reporter emailed me. Small outlet, local, respectful. She wanted to write about women entrepreneurs navigating divorce and business ownership. I read the message twice. Then I forwarded it to Julia. "Thoughts?" I asked. Julia replied with one sentence. "If you speak, speak on your terms." I agreed to the interview, not to expose Nathaniel, to document myself. The article ran on Sunday morning. It didn't mention his name. It didn't need to. By Sunday night, Nathaniel's last remaining ally, his mother, Evelyn Rhodes, posted a comment accusing me of manipulation. It was quickly met with screenshots of court filings, of emails, of timelines. She deleted the comment. I didn't save it. I didn't need to. Because the shift had already happened. People weren't asking if I was difficult anymore. They were asking how he thought he'd get away with it. And that was the moment I realized something important. I didn't need to win the case to win my life back. But the case was still coming. And in the next chapter, Nathaniel makes a move he thinks will finally silence me. Instead, it seals everything. Nathaniel's last move came disguised as concern. It arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of a certified letter, the kind that requires a signature and makes your stomach tighten before you even open it. I signed without hesitation and carried it into the studio, setting it beside the cutting table, like a pattern piece I hadn't decided how to use yet. It was a petition for a temporary restraining order against me. The language was careful, vague. It claimed I was harassing him, interfering with his business relationships, creating a hostile environment that made him fear for his safety. No dates, no specifics, just implications. I read it once, then again, slowly. He wasn't trying to win in court anymore. He was trying to silence me. I called Julia Mendel immediately. She didn't sound surprised. "This is a common pivot," she said. "When facts stop working, people try to reframe the story around fear." "What happens now?" I asked. "There's a hearing," she replied. "Soon. And this one is public." Public, that was the word he was counting on. I hung up and looked around the studio. Clients' names on the board, fabric cut and waiting. The quiet order of a space built on intention. I felt the familiar urge to minimize, to smooth, to make this go away quietly. I didn't. That afternoon, my phone started ringing. Rebecca Morgan called first. "Did you see what he filed?" "Yes," I said. "He's telling people you're unstable," she said, "that he's scared." I almost smiled. Isn't that interesting? By evening, my mother called again. Claire Morgan sounded shaken. "Amelia," she said, "this is serious." "So was locking me out of my own business," I replied. "He says you're obsessed," she continued, "that you won't let go." I leaned against the window, watching the streetlights flicker on. "Let go of what, Mom?" She didn't answer. That night, I slept at the studio. Not because I was afraid to go home, because I wanted to be surrounded by something honest. The hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. In the days leading up to it, Nathaniel ramped up his performance. He posted cryptic messages about boundaries and healing. Friends commented with heart emojis. Someone wrote, "Stay safe." I didn't respond. Instead, I worked. I finished a gown for a client named Mariah Jenkins, a nonprofit director who had watched my situation unfold quietly. When she picked it up, she hugged me. "If anyone asks," she said, "I'll tell them exactly who you are." "Thank you," I replied. On Thursday afternoon, Julia came by the studio. "We need to prepare," she said, laying documents out on the table. "He's going to rely on tone, not evidence." "I have evidence," I said. She nodded. "I know, and so does he. Just not the kind he thinks." We organized everything. Texts, emails, the lock change photo, the injunction, the discovery excerpts where he referred to managing my temperament, the timeline of events. "Most important," Julia said, "is that you stay calm." "I am calm," I replied. She smiled slightly. "I know. Stay that way." Friday morning, the courtroom was fuller than I expected. Not packed, but occupied. A few reporters, 2 people I recognized from the gala. Nathaniel sat at the opposite table, looking pale, flanked by Charles Whitman again. He didn't look at me. Judge Eleanor Ruiz presided again. She recognized the names immediately. I could tell by the way her mouth tightened when she read the petition. Charles spoke first, painted a picture of a man overwhelmed by a vengeful spouse. He used words like fixation and escalation. Julia stood next. "Your Honor," she said, "this petition is retaliation." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't editorialize. She showed the lock photo, the injunction order, the timeline of filings, the discovery excerpts, the emails where Nathaniel described controlling optics and limiting my access. Then she said one sentence that changed the room. If Ms. Rhodes wanted to harass Mr. Rhodes, she wouldn't have spent the last 3 months rebuilding a business he tried to take from her. Judge Ruiz looked directly at Nathaniel. "Mr. Rhodes," she said, "can you point me to a single documented incident of harassment?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "No," he said finally. The judge nodded. "Petition denied," she said. "And I caution you against using protective orders as strategic tools." The gavel fell. Nathaniel's shoulders slumped, just slightly. Outside the courtroom, a reporter approached me. "Ms. Rhodes," she asked, "do you feel vindicated?" I thought about the question. "No," I said. "I feel finished." That afternoon, something shifted permanently. The restraining order attempt backfired. Quietly. People stopped defending him. Not because they believed me more, because they believed him less. His friends went silent. His social media went dark. That evening, I received an email from Charles Whitman. "We advise our client to pursue a comprehensive settlement." Julia read it and raised an eyebrow. "He's out of moves." "Good," I said. That night, I sat alone in the studio and allowed myself a single moment of stillness. I thought about how close I'd come to disappearing. How easy it would have been to accept the buyout, sign the silence, let him keep the story. I didn't feel brave. I felt precise. Because this wasn't revenge driven by rage. It was consequence delivered by clarity. And the final phase was coming. Not loud, not public, just final. In the next chapter, the marriage ends on paper, and the business ends up exactly where it always belonged. The divorce paperwork arrived without ceremony. No envelope marked urgent. No dramatic message attached. Just a PDF from Julia Mendel with a subject line that read, "Draft petition for dissolution." I opened it alone in the studio after closing, the lights low, the machines quiet. Nathaniel's name appeared first, mine second. Equal on the page. Not equal in practice. Grounds, irreconcilable differences. Assets, to be determined. Business interests, contested. I read it once, then again. Not because I was emotional, but because I wanted to understand exactly where the lines would be drawn. Nathaniel filed his response 2 days later. He wanted the business, not Harbor Thread. He never mentioned that name. He wanted Rhodes Atelier. He wanted compensation for brand development, market positioning, and lost future earnings he claimed were the result of my actions. Julia laughed once when she read it. just a short breath through her nose. "He's still pretending," she said. "Pretending what?" I asked. "That the story didn't change," she replied. The preliminary settlement conference was scheduled for mid-April. Private. No judge. Just lawyers and numbers. Nathaniel showed up with a new attorney this time. A woman named Karen Feldman. Aggressive posture. Perfect posture. No warmth. She shook Julia's hand and didn't look at me. Nathaniel looked thinner, tired, like someone who hadn't realized how much energy control required until it was gone. Karen started with demands, percentages, claims, accusations dressed as concerns. Julia let her finish. Then she slid a folder across the table. "This is our counter," she said. Inside were valuation reports, my client list, revenue projections for Amelia Rhodes Tailoring, and, at the back, something Nathaniel hadn't expected: a breakdown of Rhodes Atelier's liabilities, storage fees, contract penalties, refunds owed, legal costs, the injunction losses, the canceled partnerships. The room shifted. Karen flipped through the pages, her expression tightening. "This isn't accurate," she said. "It's documented," Julia replied. Nathaniel leaned forward. "You're inflating damages." "No," I said, speaking for the first time. I stopped absorbing them. Karen closed the folder. "Let's take a break," she said. They stepped outside. I stayed seated. Julia leaned toward me. "He can't afford a prolonged fight," she said. "Not financially. Not reputationally." When they returned, the tone had changed. Karen spoke carefully. "My client is willing to walk away from claims on your current business." "And?" Julia asked. "He wants a clean split," Karen said. "No further litigation. Mutual non-disparagement." I thought about it. Not emotionally, strategically. "What about Harbor Thread?" I asked. Karen blinked. "What about it?" "The name," I said. "I want it registered to me. Immediately." Nathaniel stiffened. "That's unnecessary." "It's mine," I said. "It always was." Karen looked at him, then back at us. "That can be arranged," she said. "And the joint account withdrawals?" Julia added. Karen sighed. "Restitution can be discussed." It took 3 hours. By the end, the outlines were clear. Nathaniel would keep Rhodes Atelier, what was left of it. I didn't want it. He would relinquish any claim to my current business, my designs, my future earnings. Harbor Thread would be registered under my name. I would receive restitution for the joint funds he'd emptied. No apology, no admission, just separation. When we stood to leave, Nathaniel finally looked at me. "You didn't have to do it this way," he said. I met his eyes. "You didn't have to take it." That was the last personal sentence we ever exchanged. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. I signed the papers in the studio, Rebecca sitting across from me with a coffee she'd gone back out to get, because she said it felt like the right thing to do. "How do you feel?" she asked. I considered the question. "Unburdened," I said. By early summer, Rhodes Atelier closed quietly. No announcement, no explanation. Just a website that stopped loading. I didn't follow the details. I was busy. Harbor Thread reopened officially in June. Same name, new registration, new signage, same hands. On opening day, clients brought flowers. One brought champagne. Denise Holloway hugged me and said, "You look taller." I laughed. I did. The press interest faded. The whispers stopped. The story moved on, the way stories always do when there's no longer conflict to feed on. But something else happened too. People started asking me for advice, not about sewing, about boundaries, about contracts, about ownership, about what to do when someone they loved tried to rewrite their work as his. I answered when I could, carefully, without preaching. One afternoon, my mother came by the studio. Not unannounced this time. She called first. "I wanted to see it," she said. She walked slowly, touched the fabric, watched me work. "I didn't protect you," she said quietly. I didn't contradict her. "I'm trying to learn," she added. "That's enough for now," I replied. She nodded, relief crossing her face. When she left, I sat alone for a moment and thought about how strange it was that the hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was accepting that I didn't need validation from the people who benefited from my silence. The settlement didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure. And as summer settled into the city, I realized something else. The story wasn't finished yet. Because the final chapter of this wasn't about what Nathaniel lost. It was about what I chose to build next. And that choice was entirely mine. The first quiet morning after the divorce became final, I unlocked the studio door and stood there longer than usual. Not because I was afraid, because there was nothing chasing me anymore. No deadlines imposed by someone else's ambition. No meetings I hadn't agreed to. No voice telling me to focus on sewing, while the real decisions happened somewhere I wasn't invited. Just the shop, the light, the hum of a place that answered to me. I brewed coffee on the hot plate behind the cutting table and opened my notebook, the one I'd started the night Nathaniel locked me out. The pages were full of dates, facts, fragments of resolve. I flipped to a clean page and wrote one sentence. What do I want now? The answer didn't come immediately. That surprised me. For so long, my decisions had been reactions, defenses, corrections. Now there was space, and space can be unsettling when you're not used to it. By mid-morning, the door opened and Marisol Vega, my landlord, stepped in with a paper bag. "Breakfast," she said. "You look like someone thinking too hard." I smiled. "I might be." She handed me a sandwich and leaned against the counter. "You know the unit next door is still empty." I raised an eyebrow. "I know. You don't have to decide today," she said. "But when people start asking for more, it's usually because you're ready." After she left, I thought about that. Not expansion the way Nathaniel had meant it. Not bigger for the sake of being seen. But deeper, more intentional. That afternoon, an email came in from Olivia Chen, the department store owner who'd reached out weeks earlier. She wanted to meet. Not to rush, just to talk. We met at a quiet cafe near the river. Olivia was precise, thoughtful. She asked about sourcing, timelines, margins. She asked what I wouldn't compromise. "Fit," I said immediately. "And credit." She nodded. Good answers. She proposed a limited run. 12 pieces. Seasonal. Clearly labeled as designed and made by Amelia Rhodes Tailoring. "I don't want your brand swallowed," she said. "I want it visible." That word again. Visible. But this time, it didn't feel like a threat. "I'll think about it," I said. She smiled. "That's all I'm asking." The next call came from Lillian Park. The Coastal Women's Fund wanted to expand the program. Workshops, mentorship. They asked if I'd be willing to teach. "I've never taught formally," I said. "You teach every time you let someone watch you work," she replied. I agreed to a pilot. 1 afternoon a week, small group, paid fairly. The first class filled in 24 hours. That evening, Rebecca came by with takeout and a bottle of wine we didn't open. She sat on the floor and watched me sketch. "You're different," she said. "I know," I replied. "How?" she asked. "I don't explain myself anymore," I said. She laughed. "That tracks." We ate and talked about nothing important. The weather, a movie she'd seen, the neighbor's dog. Ordinary things that felt new because they weren't interrupted by crisis. A week later, my mother called, not to apologize again, not to ask for reassurance. "I told your aunt to stop forwarding me messages about you," Claire Morgan said. "I said if she wanted to know how you were doing, she could ask you herself." I closed my eyes. "Thank you." "It's late," she added, "but I'm learning." "Yes," I said. "You are." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief. Pride. Quiet, unshowy pride. The first workshop took place on a Thursday afternoon. 8 women, different ages, different reasons for being there. I didn't start with technique. I started with posture. Clothes don't just fit bodies, I told them. They respond to how you stand. As I spoke, I realized I was talking to myself, too. Over the next weeks, work settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. The kind you can breathe inside. The kind that doesn't require you to disappear. I accepted Olivia's proposal. We signed a contract that named me in every clause that mattered. I read it twice before signing. She didn't rush me. Nathaniel didn't contact me again. I heard about him once, through a mutual acquaintance who didn't mean to gossip. He'd moved, taken a consulting job out of state. New start, apparently. I wished him nothing. Not harm, not success. Just distance. One evening, as I locked up the studio, I noticed the light in the empty unit next door was on. Marisol waved from the doorway. "Just showing it," she called. I looked at the space. Same bones, different potential. Maybe I said. She smiled. Whenever you're ready. That night, I sat on my balcony with the city settling below and thought about how strange it was that the revenge everyone expects isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't humiliate. It doesn't end with someone on their knees. Real revenge is quieter than that. It's waking up without fear. It's choosing your own pace. It's being credited without asking. The story people told about me had changed, yes. But more importantly, the story I told myself had finally caught up to the truth. I wasn't difficult. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't expendable. I was a woman who knew how to build and who had finally stopped letting someone else decide what that meant. And in the final chapter, I'll tell you what happened the day I realized I didn't need to look back at all. Because the most powerful ending isn't confrontation. It's walking forward without carrying what was never yours to hold. The realization came on a Tuesday afternoon. Ordinary enough that I almost missed it. I was standing at the cutting table, chalk in hand, marking a seam allowance for a jacket ordered by a woman named Patricia Nguyen, a city planner who liked clean lines and didn't apologize for taking up space. The radio hummed softly in the background. Outside, traffic moved the way it always had. Nothing was wrong. That was the point. For months, my body had been braced for interruption. A phone call, an email, a shift in tone that meant I needed to defend something that was already mine. That afternoon, none of that came. I marked the fabric, cut cleanly, and moved on. When I looked up, an hour had passed. I hadn't thought about Nathaniel once. The thought surprised me enough that I sat down. I realized then how much energy I'd spent, even after everything ended, orienting myself against him. Not reacting, exactly. More like measuring, checking shadows to make sure nothing followed me. That habit didn't disappear when the danger did. It faded when my life became full enough to block it out. Later that day, Olivia Chen stopped by the studio to review samples for the limited run. She ran her fingers along the stitching, nodded, asked a question about lead times, and made a note. "This will do well," she said. "I know," I replied. She smiled. "You're not shy anymore." "No," I said. "I'm precise." When she left, I locked up early and walked along the river. The sun was low, the air warm. People passed me without knowing anything about what I'd been through, and that felt right. I didn't need witnesses anymore. That evening, I found an old box in the back of my closet. Not hidden, just ignored. Inside were pieces of my old life. Wedding photos, a program from the gala where Nathaniel had taken the stage without me. Notes I'd written to myself when I still believed explaining would fix things. I sorted through them without ceremony. The photos went back in the box. The notes didn't. I shredded them slowly, deliberately, until there was nothing left but paper confetti and a strange sense of relief. You don't always need to burn things to let them go. Sometimes, you just stop carrying them. The workshop program expanded in early fall. 2 more sessions added. A waiting list. I learned quickly that teaching wasn't about being impressive. It was about being clear. About letting people see the work without performing it. One woman stayed after class one evening. Her name was Laura Mitchell, late 30s, accountant, recently divorced. "How did you know when to stop explaining yourself?" she asked. I considered the question. When I realized the explanations weren't for them, I said, "They were for me." She nodded like that landed somewhere deep. A few days later, my mother came by again. Claire Morgan moved more carefully now. Not physically, emotionally. She brought soup. Not as an offering, just dinner. We ate at the small table by the window. The conversation drifted. Safe territory. Then she set her spoon down. "I talked to Nathaniel's mother," she said. I didn't react. "She asked me how you were doing," Claire continued. "I told her you were busy." I looked up. "That's accurate." "She said you always were," my mother said, like it was a flaw. I waited. "I told her it wasn't," Claire said quietly. I nodded. "Thank you." That was all. No reconciliation, no dramatic moment. Just a boundary held without shaking. After she left, I stood in the studio alone and listened to the quiet. Not the tense quiet of waiting, the settled kind. I thought about how often women are told to be patient, to be understanding, to be flexible. How those words are used to shape us into something smaller, easier to move around without asking. I hadn't become harder. I'd become solid. That weekend, Marisol called. "The unit next door is available if you want it," she said. "No pressure." I stood in the doorway between my studio and the empty space, looking at the wall that separated what was from what could be. "Let's do it," I said, not because I was chasing growth, because I trusted myself with it now. The lease papers were simple, clear. My name, where it belonged. When I signed, there was no rush of adrenaline, no victory high, just a steady sense of rightness. That night, as I locked up both spaces for the first time, I noticed something else. I didn't feel like I was leaving anything behind. I was going home to a life that no longer required me to prove I deserved it. And that was when I knew the story was almost finished. Not because everything was perfect, but because nothing was unresolved. In the final chapter, I'll tell you about the moment that confirmed it all. The moment I understood that revenge wasn't what I'd been building. I'd been building a future that didn't need it. The moment that confirmed everything didn't happen at a courtroom door or over signed papers. It happened on a Saturday morning in late October, when the air had just turned cool enough to matter. I was unlocking the studio when I saw a woman standing across the street, hesitating, like she wasn't sure she belonged there. Mid-30s, well-dressed, but distracted. She watched me for a second, then crossed over. "Are you Amelia Rhodes?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. She introduced herself as Caroline Hayes. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "I almost didn't come," she said. I wasn't sure if this was appropriate. "What is?" I asked. "This," she said, gesturing vaguely. "Talking to you." I unlocked the door and stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, she stood near the cutting table, taking in the space the way people do when they're measuring more than square footage. "I used to work with your ex-husband," she said finally. I nodded. I didn't ask questions. I let her continue. "I was part of the consulting team he joined after he left town," she said. "He talked about you. A lot." I waited. "He always framed it like you'd ruined something," she said. "Like he'd been forced out of a life he deserved." She paused, then looked at me directly. But nothing he said lined up with what I was seeing. "And what was that?" I asked. She took a breath. "A pattern," she told me, calmly, without drama. How he spoke about women who disagreed with him. How he took credit and deflected responsibility. How he reacted when asked for transparency. "I didn't know your story," she said, "but I recognized the shape of it." I nodded slowly. "I just wanted you to know," she added. "You weren't the problem." I believed her. Not because I needed reassurance, but because it matched the truth I'd already lived into. "Thank you for telling me," I said. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You look grounded." "I am," I replied. After she left, I stood alone in the studio for a long moment. That was it. Not vindication, not triumph, confirmation. The quiet kind that doesn't echo, but settles. Later that afternoon, the first workshop in the expanded space took place. 12 women this time. Different ages, different reasons. Same focus. I didn't start with technique. I started with ownership. "Before we talk about seams," I said, "we're going to talk about names. Yours, on your work, on your time, on your decisions." They listened. When class ended, a few lingered. One asked about contracts, another about pricing, another about what to do when someone close to you doesn't want you to grow. I answered honestly. "I didn't get stronger by fighting," I said. "I got clearer by stopping." That night, I walked home under streetlights that no longer felt watchful. At my apartment, I poured a glass of water and sat on the balcony, the city quiet below me. I thought about everything that had brought me here. The lock, the lies, the courtroom, the papers. None of it felt sharp anymore. It felt complete. A week later, Harbor Thread's limited run launched in Olivia Chen's store. 12 pieces. Every tag carried my name. Designed and made by Amelia Rhodes. No qualifiers. Sales were strong. Reviews were kind. I didn't check the numbers obsessively. I trusted them. My mother came by the studio one evening, just before closing. She stood at the doorway, looking in like someone visiting a place they didn't realize they'd been locked out of. "You built something beautiful," Claire Morgan said. "Yes," I replied. "And strong," she added. "Yes." I said, again. She nodded. I'm proud of you. I didn't rush to respond. Thank you, I said when I was ready. That was enough. I never heard from Nathaniel again. I heard about him once, months later, through someone who didn't know it mattered. He was consulting again, smaller scale, different city, still talking about missed opportunities. I didn't feel anything about it, which is how I knew I was done. If you've stayed with me to the end of this story, if any part of it felt familiar, take a moment now. Like the video, leave a comment, subscribe if you want more stories like this one. Not because this is entertainment, but because stories like this remind us we're not imagining what we feel. Here's what I learned. Revenge isn't loud. It doesn't require humiliation or collapse. Real revenge is refusing to stay in a story that needs you smaller to function. It's keeping your name on your work. It's choosing clarity over chaos. It's building something that doesn't need someone else's permission to stand. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I didn't destroy anyone. I simply stopped handing over the parts of myself I was taught to give away. And the life that followed didn't need justification. It just needed space. That's where I live now, in the space I built.